So I ended my review of the first season of Noragami saying that it wasn't great, but it had potential. Since I started making reviews, I've made a point to try to be fair with the shows I disliked and remain objective with the shows I loved. I say this now because since starting season 2, I've gotten really into this show. That said, I'm going to do my best to keep this review from becoming a rambling, gushing mess. On a few other housekeeping notes, I was mistaken in my review for Season 1 when I said this show had not been dubbed, but I watched this season in Japanese also. And finally, as with Season 1, I'm going to try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. When it comes to specifics about Season 2, fair warning, I may spoil things that happened in Season 1. I'm going ahead on the assumption that you've seen the first season if you're watching this. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's start. I ended my review for the first season by laying out all the things I would like to see improved upon in the second. One of the biggest was the characterization of Kazuma and Bishamon, who were set up to be major characters only to fade into the background, so I was pleased to see the two of them expanded on from the opening seconds of the very first episode. The first half of this season focuses almost exclusively on Bishamon and the growing discord among her clan of Regalias. As a result, we finally get to see the reason behind her hatred of Yato and why Kazuma owes him a debt. This is also the introduction of a new villain manipulating everything from the sidelines. I didn't expect it to be this hard to make this review without spoilers. Long story short, we finally get to see the long-awaited battle between Yato and Bishamon, and the end of this arc left me oddly satisfied. Oddly, because I am rarely totally satisfied with character development. It certainly helps that Kazuma and Bishamon don't just disappear from the show after the battle ends, but even before the big conclusion, I really felt like we'd seen the completion of their character development. By the time I reached episode 7, I was ready to move on with the story. Speaking of, I see episode 7 sort of as a bridge between the two stories. Season 2 is split almost perfectly in half, the first half covering Bishamon's story, and the second moving on to introduce the other gods of fortune and their problems. But episode 7 sticks out because it was really lighthearted and sweet after a lot of darkness and tragedy, and also because it is very Yukine-focused. He was the only character who was really developed by the end of Season 1, and I expressed my concerns in that review that trying to develop him further could potentially undo all of the progress he's made. The end of episode 7 sticks out to me because it really showcases how far he's come, and if their in-between episode had to focus on anything, I'm pleased with their choice. So along with introducing the other gods of fortune, Ebisu in particular, the latter half of Season 2 expands on another thing I was optimistic for, further developing Yato's character. Yato has always walked a very interesting line when it comes to characterization, and I have to admit I haven't always been his biggest fan. He's played both the comic relief and the mysterious figure with a dark past. Up until this point, it's been hard to tell which is the real Yato, the playful, compassionate one, or the cold assassin who will carry out any job as long as he's paid for it. Episode 7 is also the point where we get to see the start of his character grow. The line that sticks with me the most is, I want people to believe in me, not money. I don't feel like he's fully developed by the end. Every time we're given some answers, they just stir up some more questions. But we're on the right track. Does it feel like I'm forgetting someone? Oh, right. Hiyori is quickly becoming one of those characters I refer to as casualties of potential, so let's talk a little about Hiyori. The very setup of her character is a little lacking. Before falling in with the gods and phantoms, Hiyori was as normal as could be. Her family was happy and well off. There was no reason to pay her any attention. Throughout Season 1, she was still a little dull and out of place, but she fit in with the group dynamic enough to justify her inclusion. Season 2 lost that fragile hold on Hiyori's relevance. It just became so clear that this is really the god's story, and it's disappointing that the writers couldn't do better than to simply leave her as an audience surrogate. I wanted her to be important to the story, but every time she was on screen I couldn't really understand why. But honestly, I almost would have preferred for her to just disappear without an explanation over the half-assed attempt to keep her relevant that we were given. There comes a point, as the tensions with Bishamon are heating up, where Hiyori and Kazuma are trapped in a dungeon. This is probably the one that tests my sanity the most. Kazuma tells her that if she stays in her spirit form too long, her body will die. I'm sorry, where was this a season and a half ago when she was spending practically all her time running around in spirit form with Yato and Yukine? But even this, likely invented just to keep the stakes high, I could live with. It's afterwards, when they do break out, that drives me crazy. The sense of urgency just disappears. Hiyori escapes her prison just to stand on the sidelines and do nothing of consequence to the fight, surprise, surprise, but even when they get back to the human world, no one is rushing to get her back to her hospitalized body. After the battle, things largely go back to normal, meaning Hiyori is still largely absent and out of place in the story. In fact, it gets to the point where her inclusion in the story feels forced and intrusive. Yato could be dying, I don't have time to care about your relationship troubles. I don't hate Hiyori as a character. I just hate the way her character is being handled. I'd go as far as to call it negligent. Hiyori was basically a clean slate. They could have done literally anything with her. I just see so many missed chances. For example, Yato meets the goddess of the underworld and she looks just like Hiyori, and I got so excited. Finally, she'll have some connection to the gods. Only to be shot down. Nope, Izanami just looks different to everyone, and to Yato she looks like Hiyori. Or they could have taught her to fight. She probably would have been thrilled given she's a martial arts fan. Or, as a friend suggested, she could have become a priestess, connected herself to the far shore that way. Or they could have just ended her story, repaired the link between her soul and her body and let her move on with her normal life. Acknowledge that she has no place in this story anymore. Just stop this slow, torturous, poorly done effort to keep her relevant, because it's not working. Okay, that's enough ranting for one review. On the technical side, nothing much has changed since Season 1. I didn't notice any changes to the background pieces, but I enjoyed them just as much the second time around. I don't like the new ending theme any better than the old one, and I missed the first opening. Music-wise, I prefer the visuals to the second, but I've warmed to the second theme over time. In my first review, I described the animation as standard, and then realized shortly after that this would probably be interpreted in a negative way, which wasn't my intention at all. Nowadays, standard animation is still really good, especially if you're like me and still watching quite a few older shows for the first time. So there was nothing super flashy or unique that really stood out to me, but I am entirely pleased with Noragami's animation. So how does Season 2 measure up? I'm not sure Noragami has achieved true greatness yet, but that's mostly because it just doesn't feel finished yet. Their world building as a whole really reflects Yato's character development. It's come a long way, but the writers have created as many questions as they've answered. This feels like an excellent continuation, but I will be sorely disappointed if this was the end. I feel like it doesn't show in this review because I tried to refrain from going into specifics, but the more episodes I burned through, the more I fell in love with this show. I could feel it starting late into Season 1, right around the time of Yukine's ablution, but the more they developed the world and the other gods, the more sucked in I got. I wasn't ready for it to end, especially given that it ends with an after-credits cliffhanger scene. Let's just say we better be getting a Season 3.